They laughed at a quiet boy for saying his dad was in special forces. Even the cop joined in. But when the truth walked through the school doors in full uniform, the silence said everything. It started over mashed potatoes and chocolate milk. Kendrick Mays was sitting at the edge of Table 6 in the Jefferson Middle School cafeteria in Fresno, California. He had his tray, his earbuds in, and his mouth shut. Just like every other day. That's how he liked it. Blend in, finish lunch, go back to class. No waves, no noise. Just another day to get through without being noticed too much. But today, someone noticed. "Hey, Kendrick," called out Tyson Green, a wiry 7th grader with a busted backpack and way too much energy. "Heard you tell Ms. Ledbetter your dad's some big-time soldier or whatever. Like, special forces?" Kendrick didn't answer at first. He looked at Tyson, then at the handful of other kids watching. "So what? You just gonna sit there and act like that's normal?" Tyson said louder. "You lying or what?" More eyes turned to him. A few smirks. Kendrick sighed through his nose and took out one earbud. "I'm not lying," he said quietly. "He's in the special forces." There was a short silence, just long enough for people to lean in, and then the laughter started. Loud, sharp, mean. Even some kids who didn't know Kendrick joined in. That was the kind of school this was. If someone else was the target, you laughed to stay off the radar. From across the room, the school resource officer, Deputy Rick Callahan, leaned back in his chair. He was chewing gum and checking his phone, but caught the noise. He stood up and walked over, probably expecting to break up a fight. "What's going on here?" he asked in that flat, uninterested voice he used when he already didn't care about the answer. "Nothing," Tyson said, grinning. "Just asking Kendrick about his dad. Says he's special forces or something." Callahan looked down at Kendrick, then scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Special forces? Really?" He chuckled. "Yeah, and my uncle's James Bond." That got the biggest laugh of all. The officer's voice carried. Some kids banged the table. A few even clapped. Kendrick just stared at his food. Callahan gave Kendrick a dismissive pat on the shoulder. "Come on, man. You don't gotta make stuff up to impress people." Kendrick didn't say a word. He picked up his fork, his hands stiff. He felt every set of eyes on him, every whisper. His ears burned, his jaw clenched, but he wouldn't let them see it. Wouldn't give them that. He thought about standing up, thought about saying something. But what? That his dad had scars on his back from a helicopter crash overseas? That he never talked about his missions but always came home with this far-off look in his eyes? That his dad didn't post it on Facebook because people in his line of work couldn't? They wouldn't believe him? Nobody at Jefferson Middle ever did. Deputy Callahan walked off, still chuckling to himself. Kids started returning to their own conversations. The moment had passed. For them. Not for Kendrick. He put his earbud back in. He'd finished the lunch. He always did. But he couldn't taste anything. Just rubbery chicken and dry air. And across the cafeteria, someone pulled out their phone, already typing something about Kendrick the Spy Kid. It would be on Instagram before the bell rang. But what no one expected was how quickly everything would flip. Jefferson Middle wasn't a bad school. Not on paper, anyway. It had clean halls, recycled air, and a principal who sent out motivational quotes every Monday morning. But for Kendrick Mays, it felt more like a cold, slow drip, day after day, small things piling up until you just stopped caring. Kendrick had figured out the system early. Keep your head down, stay quiet. Don't give anyone a reason to remember your name. He didn't raise his hand unless he knew the answer was bulletproof. He walked the same path from homeroom to math, to gym, to English and back, keeping close to the wall. Not because he was scared. He just didn't see the point in drawing attention. That lunchroom moment had spread faster than he thought. By third period, 2 kids tried to trip him in the hallway. By gym, someone whispered Green Beret Jr. when he missed a free throw. Even Coach Benning laughed a little, not cruelly, just the kind of tired adult laugh that said, "Come on, kid." What hurt more was how normal it felt. Like the second you were different, even a little, People felt entitled to put you in your place. Ms. Ledbetter, his English teacher, asked him to stay behind after class. She looked at him over her glasses, her mouth doing that tight little smile teachers give when they think they're being kind. "Kendrick, is everything okay at home?" He blinked. "Yeah, I just heard there was an incident at lunch. I want you to know you're safe here. If your father isn't really in the—" "He is," Kendrick said firmly. Ms. Ledbetter paused. "All right, I just wanted to check in." He walked out before she could say anything else. Every word felt like a layer of disbelief being stacked on top of him. No one believed him. And they didn't have to. He wasn't looking for validation. His dad always told him that truth didn't need applause. "Real ones don't talk loud," Dorian Mays had said once, while fixing a loose cabinet door in their tiny kitchen. "Loud men are usually lying." That was 6 months ago. Kendrick remembered how his dad said it without even looking up from the screwdriver. Just calm, steady. Like he was teaching Kendrick how to be steel without ever saying the word. He never got long stretches with his dad. Sometimes just a few days between deployments. The house got quieter after he left, but Kendrick didn't mind. His mum was solid, worked double shifts at the urgent care, and never forgot to check his homework. But it was those short, powerful moments with his father that stuck. He remembered one morning, sitting on the porch while it rained. Dorian handed him a small folding knife. Not to use, just to hold. "Balance matters," he said. "Not just in your hand. In here, too." He tapped Kendrick's chest. None of that fit in a lunchtime joke. None of it translated through cafeteria rumors. Kids didn't care about inner balance or truth. They cared about who could roast you the best. Kendrick didn't want to be tough. He wanted to be invisible again. But that afternoon had lit something in him. Not anger. Not yet. Just heat under the surface. He sat in math class, fingers curled into his hoodie sleeves, the corners of his notebook filled with scratch marks. The numbers on the board blurred. His leg bounced under the desk. All he wanted was to finish the day. That's when his classroom door opened. Mrs. Castillo stepped in from the hallway and leaned toward his teacher, whispering something. The teacher glanced at Kendrick, then nodded. "Kendrick," she said, "you're being checked out. Grab your things." Checked out? That never happened. His mum was working a double, and his dad wasn't supposed to be back for another month. Confused, he stuffed his books into his bag and walked toward the door. Mrs. Castillo didn't say much, just gestured for him to follow. Still, that one afternoon would change how they all saw him. Outside, the sky had dimmed. Not dark, but that weird in-between time where shadows start to stretch longer than they should. Kendrick followed Mrs. Castillo through the main corridor toward the front office, still trying to piece together who could possibly be checking him out. His mom would have called, unless something happened. His chest tightened at the thought. He turned a corner and froze. Through the front glass, parked right in front of the building, sat a black SUV. The kind that didn't belong in a school parking lot. Not flashy, but official. Tires still ticking with heat. Doors shut tight. Standing beside it was a man in full uniform. Kendrick stopped walking. The hall felt smaller somehow. Quieter. Like the noise of the building hadn't followed him here. He knew that stance. The way his dad stood when he was on, back straight, boots planted, eyes scanning like nothing ever surprised him, but everything mattered. Uniform pressed, sleeves crisp. His name patch. Mays, barely visible through the glass. Kendrick's stomach flipped. His dad wasn't supposed to be back. Not yet. Inside the main office, Master Sergeant Dorian Mays stood calmly at the counter, speaking with the secretary. He wasn't smiling. He never smiled much in public, but he didn't need to. The man carried presence like weight on his shoulders. Heavy, unmoving. "I'm here for my son," he said, voice low but firm. "Kendrick Mays. He's in 8th grade. The secretary looked flustered. "Oh, yes, sir. Just a moment. I'll call someone from the office to bring him up." But she didn't need to. because Deputy Rick Callahan, standing a few feet away by the coffee machine, had already turned around. At first, he didn't recognize Dorian, just saw the uniform and raised an eyebrow. He walked over with the same half-smirk he wore earlier. "You military?" he asked. Dorian didn't blink. "Yes." "What branch?" "Army. Special Forces." Callahan gave a short laugh, like he thought he was still in on some inside joke. "You got ID?" Dorian slowly reached into his jacket, pulled out his military ID, and handed it over without a word. Callahan glanced at it, and the smirk fell from his face. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sharp, like the air shifted, like gravity got heavier in that tiny room. "You're Kendrick's father?" Callahan asked, more careful now. "Yes." Callahan cleared his throat. He mentioned you today. I didn't realize." Dorian cut in, voice still even. "No reason you would. Most people don't." He took back his ID, pocketed it, and offered his hand. There was something about the way he held it out. Not threatening, not warm, just direct, firm, solid. Callahan hesitated, just for a second, then shook it. Dorian's grip was calm but unflinching. A handshake like steel. Callahan's face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. His eyes dropped. Shoulders stiffened. That moment of forced eye contact passed, and he stepped back. The secretary buzzed the classroom. Outside the glass doors, Kendrick watched the whole thing. He didn't move at first, just stared at his dad. Not because he didn't believe it, but because it didn't make sense. Why now? Why today? Then Dorian turned toward the door. Their eyes met, and just like that, everything else faded. For the first time all day, Kendrick didn't feel small. He walked into the office, slowly, like his body needed to catch up to what his mind already knew. "Dad?" Dorian gave a small nod. "You ready?" Kendrick's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the secretary, at Deputy Callahan, now pretending to read something on the wall. He turned back. "Yeah." His dad picked up his backpack, tossed it over his own shoulder like it weighed nothing. "We've got a couple days," Dorian said. "Wanted to grab you early. Thought we could hit Yosemite before I go back." Kendrick didn't smile, but his eyes said everything. He followed his dad out the door, but it wasn't just the sight of Dorian that caught their attention. It was what happened next. As the glass door closed behind them, Kendrick felt the air shift. Cooler, quieter, more grounded. It wasn't the breeze or the fading sun, it was his dad. Just being near him always had that effect, like Kendrick had been holding his breath all day without realizing it, and now he could finally exhale. The black SUV sat idle in front of the school. Nothing fancy. Government issued. The same kind of vehicle Kendrick remembered riding in once before, during a brief visit to Fort Bragg. Dorian walked toward it, his boots hitting the pavement in that controlled, even rhythm. Kendrick followed silently, eyes forward. Behind them, the office door opened again. "Kendrick!" a voice called out. It was Deputy Callahan. Dorian turned around before Kendrick could answer. Callahan stepped forward, hands loosely at his sides like he wasn't sure what to do with them. He glanced at Kendrick, then locked eyes with Dorian. That same unease, the one he tried to hide, flickered in his expression. "I didn't mean to... earlier," Callahan said. "Didn't realize..." Dorian's voice cut in, not sharp, just steady. "You don't need to finish that sentence." Callahan opened his mouth, closed it again. Dorian walked a few steps closer. "You thought my son was lying. Because what he said didn't fit your idea of what's believable coming from someone like him." Callahan shifted on his feet. "I didn't mean..." "But you did," Dorian said calmly. "You meant it enough to laugh." Kendrick stood still, watching. This wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was something colder, stronger. His dad didn't need to yell. He didn't need to curse. He just looked the man in the eyes and told the truth, and it hit harder than anything else could. Callahan looked at Kendrick again, the usual authority in his voice gone. Look, kid, I shouldn't have said what I said," he muttered. You said your dad's special forces. I should have listened. Kendrick didn't answer. He just stared. Not angry, just present. And that silence made Callahan shift again. Dorian placed a hand on Kendrick's shoulder. You good? Kendrick nodded once. A real one this time. They turned toward the SUV, and Dorian opened the passenger door for his son. Before getting in, Kendrick glanced back. Callahan hadn't moved. His arms were crossed now, but his face wasn't smug. It was different. Quiet. Like he was still processing something too big to joke about. Dorian got behind the wheel and pulled out smoothly. The car rolled past the school building, where a few kids were still lingering near the entrance. Some recognized Kendrick, eyes wide as they took in the uniform, the insignia, the way Kendrick climbed into the car like it was nothing. Kendrick didn't wave, didn't smirk, just stared straight ahead. Inside the SUV it was silent for a minute. Then Dorian spoke, eyes still on the road. Heard what happened today. Kendrick blinked. Who told you? Your mom called, Dorian said. Said someone humiliated you in front of the whole cafeteria. Said a grown man laughed at you. Kendrick looked out the window. It wasn't the first time. Dorian gripped the wheel tighter. It better be the last. They rode in silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was solid, like the ground after a storm. I don't care what they say, Kendrick said finally. I know who you are. Dorian glanced at him, then back at the road. You don't need to defend me, he said. You just need to stand in your truth. Let them catch up. Kendrick didn't reply, but the knot in his chest loosened just a little. But Kendrick still had no idea his dad was even coming. The road out of town stretched wide and empty, dotted with eucalyptus trees and old gas stations. Kendrick stared out the window, still trying to make sense of the last hour. His dad being back was one thing, but showing up like that, in uniform, in front of everyone, that wasn't like him. Dorian rarely talked about his job. What he did, where he went. There were rules, of course, but even beyond that, he never seemed interested in the glory. The man didn't even own a single social media account. You hungry? Dorian asked, eyes still on the road. Kendrick gave a small shrug. Kind of. Dorian nodded and took the next exit. They pulled into a roadside diner called Pete's Grill on the edge of Madeira. Kendrick had never been there before, but Dorian seemed to know the place. Inside, it smelled like bacon grease and lemon-scented cleaner. A few truckers sat at the counter. No one looked up when they walked in. They sat in a booth by the window. A waitress brought water and menus, smiling politely but without the small talk. You get anything you want? Dorian said, flipping open his own menu. Kendrick ordered pancakes and sausage. Dorian went with black coffee and an omelette. When the waitress walked off, the silence settled again. This time, Kendrick broke it. Why'd you come back early? Dorian leaned back. Because I heard you needed me. But you're leaving again soon, right? 2 days. Kendrick nodded, playing with his straw wrapper. I didn't expect you to show up like that, he said, looking up. I thought you'd just call or wait until you were home. Dorian's jaw flexed slightly, not in anger, just in thought. Sometimes showing up says more than words, he said. Kendrick thought about that. How everyone had stared when his dad walked in. How the laughter died so fast you could hear it hit the floor. You didn't have to say anything to him, Kendrick said. To that cop. I could have handled it. Dorian raised an eyebrow. You shouldn't have had to. I'm used to it. I don't want you to be. They sat quietly again. Outside, a semi rolled past with a low rumble. Son, Dorian said after a moment, being underestimated will follow you. It doesn't stop when you grow up. But how you respond to it, that's yours. You don't owe them explanations. Just proof. Kendrick sipped his water, his mind still turning. I didn't even think they'd believe me, he said. I didn't come for them, Dorian replied. I came for you. The food arrived. They ate in silence, like they always did when they were together. No rush, no pressure to fill space. Kendrick hadn't realized how much he missed that until now. His father's calm made the noise from school feel miles away. Midway through his pancakes, Kendrick looked up. You ever get tired of people doubting you all the time," Dorian said. "But I don't carry their doubt. That's their weight, not mine." Kendrick smiled slightly. "You sound like Mom." Dorian smirked for the first time all day. "Well, she's usually right." The waitress brought the check. Dorian paid in cash, left a generous tip. As they walked back to the SUV, Kendrick glanced at him sideways. "You ever scare people on purpose?" Dorian chuckled under his breath. "No, but I don't fix their fear, either." Kendrick opened the car door, hesitating before climbing in. "I'm glad you came." Dorian looked at him, his expression softening just a little. "So am I." They pulled back onto the road, headed toward Yosemite. No music, no news radio. Just the quiet understanding between two people who didn't need many words to feel known. Kendrick looked at the world passing outside his window, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel invisible. But even as they walked out, Kendrick didn't realize the message his dad just left behind. Monday morning came like it always did. Alarm buzzing at 6:30, the same peanut butter toast, the same slow walk to the bus stop. But something in Kendrick's chest felt different now. Lighter, maybe. Or just less heavy. He hadn't said much to anyone over the weekend. He and his dad had spent 2 full days hiking around Yosemite, talking about random things. Music, books, old memories. Nothing heavy. Nothing forced. Just time. Real time. And when Kendrick stepped onto that school bus Monday morning, he didn't expect anything to be different. But it was. It started with the way the kids looked at him. Not mocking, not icy. Just unsure. Like they weren't sure what to do with the version of Kendrick that had walked out of school last week beside a man who looked like he commanded storms. In first period, Tyson Green didn't make eye contact. He kept his voice low, even skipped his usual routine of poking at Kendrick's sneakers or mumbling smart remarks when the teacher turned around. By lunch, word had spread. Some kids were still whispering, sure, but it was different. No jokes this time, just questions, curious stares. No one called him Spy Kid. No one laughed when he sat down. Even Coach Benning, who rarely noticed anything beyond the scoreboard, gave Kendrick a weird half-wave in the hallway. But the biggest change came during 5th period. Deputy Callahan walked into Kendrick's science class. Heads turned. Teachers usually sent for kids through the office. It was strange to see the officer come in himself. "Can I borrow Kendrick for a second?" Callahan said. The teacher nodded, confused. Kendrick stood slowly and followed him into the hall. They stood in silence for a moment. Callahan rubbed the back of his neck like he wasn't used to apologizing. "I was wrong the other day," he said, eyes flicking to the floor. "I shouldn't have said what I said about your dad." Kendrick didn't reply. He didn't need to. Callahan nodded. "That handshake. Your old man's the real deal. It shows." Kendrick looked him straight in the eye. "I know. There wasn't much more to say." Callahan cleared his throat, gave a stiff nod, and walked away. Later that week, during lunch, one of the quieter kids from Kendrick's math class, Jalen Ruiz, walked over. He looked nervous, holding his tray with both hands. "Hey," Jalen said, glancing around. "Mind if I sit here?" Kendrick shrugged. "Sure." Jalen sat down slowly, like he wasn't sure if it was a trap. He poked at his spaghetti, then finally asked, "So your dad's like actual special forces?" "Yeah," Kendrick said. Jalen hesitated. "That's cool. I mean, I didn't think you were lying or anything. You don't have to explain." Jalen nodded. They didn't talk much after that, but it was something. And that was how it started. Not a flood, just tiny shifts. A teacher who looked at him a little differently. A kid who didn't laugh quite as loudly. Small acknowledgements that maybe, just maybe, they'd misjudged him. Kendrick didn't strut through the hallways. He wasn't about to change who he was. But for the first time, he didn't feel like he had to shrink either. That night, as he sat at the dinner table with his mom, she slid her phone across the table. It was a photo. Someone from school had snapped it, Kendrick and his dad walking out of the office. Dorian's uniform sharp against the light. Kendrick just a step behind. "It's been going around," she said. Kendrick stared at it for a moment. "Why do people need proof so bad?" he asked. His mom smiled softly. "Because some folks only believe what they can see. But that doesn't make the truth any less real." But this story isn't really about one day. It's about what people assume. Weeks passed. Life at Jefferson Middle started to smooth back into its usual rhythm. Pop quizzes, hallway drama, the bell ringing 5 minutes too late when you're starving. But for Kendrick Mays, something had changed that hadn't gone unnoticed. He still sat in the back of the classroom, still kept his voice low. But there was a new kind of quiet around him. Not the kind that pushed him aside, but the kind that gave space. Respect, maybe, or just recognition. People didn't stop him in the halls or ask him to tell stories about his dad. That wasn't the kind of school this was. But teachers spoke to him like they finally saw him. Like he wasn't invisible anymore. Like what he said mattered. He never mentioned the cafeteria incident again. He didn't need to. The people who laughed the loudest remembered it. So did the ones who watched and stayed silent. Tyson Green never apologized. But he never joked again either. And sometimes that's the only apology people like that know how to give. One afternoon after school, Kendrick was walking past the gym when he saw something unexpected. Deputy Callahan, standing by the vending machine, nodded toward him. Kendrick stopped. "I meant what I said the other day," Callahan muttered. "About your dad and you." Kendrick didn't smile. But he didn't look away either. "You don't have to keep saying it," he said. Callahan paused. "You remind me of him." Kendrick tilted his head. "You don't even know him." Callahan gave a slow breath through his nose. "Don't need to. You walked through a whole room of people laughing and didn't say a word. That takes more strength than most adults I know." Kendrick gave a small nod, then kept walking. He wasn't looking for praise, but it felt like something had finally shifted in that man. At home that night, Kendrick sat across from his mom at the dinner table. She was grading papers, sipping tea. The house felt quieter without his dad around again, but Kendrick didn't feel the absence like before. "What's on your mind?" she asked without looking up. Kendrick leaned back in his chair. "Do you think people change?" She set her pen down, looked at him for a moment. "Some do," she said. "But most just see things they hadn't noticed before." Kendrick thought about that. Thought about the look on Callahan's face when he realized who he was talking to. Thought about the kids who used to laugh at him, now choosing to say nothing at all. Maybe it wasn't change. Maybe it was clarity. Maybe people just needed to be reminded that everyone's story is bigger than the small version they invent in their heads. That night, Kendrick sat at his desk and opened a notebook he hadn't touched in months. He wrote 3 sentences, then paused. "My dad doesn't wear a cape. He doesn't need to. He just shows up. And that's enough. Some people need proof. I've had mine my whole life." He closed the notebook. Let it sit. Because sometimes the lesson doesn't come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes it's a man who walks into a room, doesn't say much, and leaves the whole place changed. Kendrick didn't need to be louder. He just needed to remember what mattered. And maybe someone watching this right now needs to hear the same thing. Don't let their assumptions define you. Let your truth do the talking. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of someone in your life who carries strength quietly, take a second to hit subscribe. These stories matter, and they deserve to be told. Because the world doesn't always listen to the quiet ones. But maybe it should.